I think we're right on the precipice of looking at how we can engage, and the necessity of engaging with Indigenous communities and Indigenous knowledge systems, the application of science and data and information, and bringing those two things together to really create a vibrant force of how we need to move ahead in protecting and strengthening biodiversity. And I want to call it even the wellness of ourselves as human beings, regardless of whatever our background is, and the connection to place and the connection to the landscape.
Yes, there's a lot in being able to access these ways of thinking. There's so much more that can be talked about and thought about and felt and understood, I think. And it leads into my next question. Yes, go ahead. And
just on that point, before we kind of move on, is that understand that this engagement is not only a critical piece, but it's really a valued piece, and it's really according to our understanding of precipitated by prophecy and spirit. But the point of it is that this is something that is just starting out. So these conversations and the evolution of these conversations have to start somewhere. And if they've already started, but it is a process, it is a practice and process. It is evolving, and it will only get deeper as time goes on. So, but we're just initiating most of our conversations right now. And as we move ahead, what we understand and what we do right now, all of us that are connected here online, all of us, that are working within these areas, our knowledge will only deepen and be more broad and more powerful as we move forward. So what we understand right now will be different in 5 years, will be different in 10 years, will be different in 20 years, to be able to see those young people that are coming ahead and their opportunities now to pick it up and to make the changes that are necessary to ensure that biodiversity is protected and landscape is respected.
Thanks, Dan. And I think that leads into my next question quite well for Larry, because Larry, you mentioned earlier this concept of ethical space. And if these conversations are to occur, we need to have an ethical space within which they can occur. And I know that concept has guided the work that you've been involved in at the federal level and continues to shape the dialogue and conversations that are going on around IPCAs. So I'm wondering if you could explain to everybody this concept of ethical space and its relevance for considering biodiversity in the spirit and practice of reconciliation.
Sure, and thank you, Anne. Simply put, it's the creation of a safe space to be able to discuss, collaborate respectfully, of course, in this context, around issues of conservation. A couple of things come to mind. And again, historically, it's how this country, how Canada was formed. When at the Treaty of Niagara, 2,500 plus or minus Indigenous representatives came, it came out of the systems of governance, much like Clint has described, and various iterations, but there were systems of governance that were designed to collaborate. They were designed to balance and avoid conflict, unlike the adversarial governance systems we see today dominating the landscape. So this is an important feature in creating the recommendations of both the Indigenous Circle of Experts and the National Advisory Panel. And both sets of recommendations expressed how well they worked in the process of creating those recommendations, and how much they, both panels, both groups felt that they were critically important in moving forward with conservation in Canada. I also want to add that that globally, I was glad to hear Dan bring up our global responsibility, the fact that climate change and biodiversity loss are part of the global agenda. They emerged out of the Earth Summit in 1992. In 2010, the HE targets were established, and Target 18, which acknowledges the inclusion of Indigenous peoples or knowledge systems, to really do that, to understand how that works. And often you'll hear that all 20 targets have to work together. The only way that can happen is to create ethical space. And the way it was done in the Pathways 1 process is that we made sure that there was accommodation for our ceremonies. They were shared ceremonies. And again, this is a reflection on the Treaty of Niagara in 1764, when Crown representatives knew our languages, our ceremonial protocols, and knew how to produce wampum. So we revisited that cross-cultural approach to things, and everyone was encouraged by the results. So that's part of what the recommendations see in terms of moving forward. But it comes with a responsibility, and the responsibility is for all parties to have at least a fundamental understanding of the cultures that are participating in a collaborative effort on conservation, and to have enough understanding to ensure that the space is truly safe, that people can speak their truth. And I'll wrap it up by saying this, and in effect, Clint and Dan have already touched on it, but I think of the medicine wheel, and I feel that much of governance from the Western model is very strong intellectually, very strong in terms of physical understanding. But what's been missing is the emotional or empathic and spiritual knowledge systems. And when you bring the knowledge from the four directions, as I would say, then you make much smarter decisions. When you have empathy, when you understand the spirit of a tree, you're going to think twice before you cut it, and you're going to cut it for a good reason, not for greed. So it's important that there's room for that to happen. And as we all know, colonialism has segregated those other two important sources of knowledge.
Thanks, Larry. I'm watching the clock, and because I know we want to take some time at the end for questions from the audience. So I'm going to go to Clint again, and we'll see if we have time for maybe one or two questions again after that. So Clint, you are a wonderful advocate for networking and sharing good models. And certainly the Walpole Island Land Trust is regarded as a very interesting and promising model by many people. So I'm wondering if you could tell us about this land trust, the first First Nations land trust in Canada, and what the model offers. And also, I know I've heard you speak about its limitations, so I want to speak about both what it offers, what it promises, and also the limitations.
Okay, thanks. One of the things that it as a model it offers is it allows us to kind of protect areas, things of ecological, cultural, agricultural value, but also helps us to maintain and enhance lands and waters, implement conservation practices, helps us to educate and train the public, help reconnect people to the land, help people understand their roles and their responsibilities handed down to us by the Creator. Helps us to conduct research, to secure funds to implement our aims and objects. So those are just some of the things that we can do with this tool. It brings like-minded people together for conservation efforts. Our land trust is focusing on maintaining our relationships with the land. That's our vision, and each other. Our mission is to share knowledge to restore and conserve Kejana ecosystems for the benefit of everyone. And we do that through some of our goals, which are to understand our relationship to the land. So listening to our community and some of the needs that are there, then conducting research to better understand our relationship and the needs of the land itself and the waters. sharing knowledge together. So we're engaging and involving our community and working at building capacity and knowledge within the community. We're also looking at caring for lands, protecting, purchasing lands, and managing them in different ways, using fire, for example, to maintain our grassland habitats. But also looking at sustaining our efforts through policies and other foundational things that will help our charities kind of persist. And I had struggles with this, and I got to lay credit here in our community. A mentor of mine and somebody that was really inspired back, that used to do my job back in the 80s, come up with this idea of this land trust. So when I started in 1998, I've seen some of her work and looked at the documents that she had prepared, and I thought about bringing that forward and actually involved her and some others to try to create a land trust back then in 98, but it didn't take off. It wasn't until 2008 that we got it registered. But she was very inspirational. She was always talking about the need to kind of work together. And she often wrote poems and things that were in our newsletter in the community, but also in the local newspapers. And it's one of the ideas she talked about was our land trust was born out of the desire to make sure that our legacy to the future is something that we and they can be proud of. We want the children of the future to say, wow, they were really thinking of us, not what were they thinking. So that's one of the things that far as a model it has to offer. Some of the limitations in this modern tool puts the weight and the burden of conservation on a few. Average folks can point to Environment Canada, Ontario Nature, whoever, and other environmental organizations to say they'll take care of things for all of us. Where our approach, traditional approaches to conservation, meant everybody had a role in being good caretakers. It wasn't just for one handful of groups or others. Another thing in setting up our land trust, we're restricted by the Indian Act. Other land trusts across Canada are able to protect lands in perpetuity, but we're forced because of limitations under the Indian Act to set a time limit on ours. So we're just under 1 million years. That's how we set up ours. So we also had to. We also yeah, we were fighting some back and forth with folks at the time, but also having fallback mechanisms in case our land trust or charity folded. So we have it in our charter that lands that we protect will be placed back in the hands of the band. And as usual with grassroots movements, there's always usually a handful of people that end up doing most of the work. So that's one of the limitations. And it's also a big time commitment. And there's lots of legalities to adhere to. And it's not a model of our own making. So and sometimes it can take time for average people to understand our motives. Why are we trying to protect things? And yeah, so those are some of the struggles that we have with this model. And like I said, I had reservations in going ahead with this, but I've seen it as a tool because of impacts from on our culture, hits and residential school impacts and nameless other things that affected our culture, language, and cultural ways of life. They're in a lull, but we're having to find ways to bring them back. And that's one of the things that we were always leaning to, is that education is a big part, and involving younger people is essential as well.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks so much. I'm looking again at the clock, and I see we have 7 minutes left. So I think what I'm going to do is jump over to some of the questions that have been put forward by participants that are listening in. And one of them, I'm going to start with one that ties in with what you were just mentioning, Clint, about young people and education. We have a question from Jessica Spano, who asks, in what ways can we bring this knowledge and understanding into the classrooms to help teach our youth. So I'll just put that out there for anybody who is, any of the 30 who would like to respond.
If I can jump in real quick, is involve knowledge holders. Invite them in to participate. Ben, Larry, others, just but don't try to appropriate their knowledge.
Thanks, Clint. Larry or Dan, did you have anything that you'd like to add?
Maybe just as an educator, that's a really good question. So thank you for that. But as an educator, that always has become like the forefront of the work that we've done. We've created, to address that issue, we've created a program at Trent called TRACS. It's the TR is the Trent Aboriginal Cultural Knowledge and Science Program. And we work with mainly high school students, but some elementary as well. And it's made up of young people who go into classrooms and have created sort of integrated curriculum or interactive curriculum that looks at particular issues and helps students, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, begin to see the relationship and the connection between our distinct knowledge systems. They apply those knowledge systems to address particular issues, and in that way, provide a light to shine on not only math and science and looking at the more Western applications of learning, but also then at the same time be able to recognize and to affirm and honor Indigenous knowledge traditions. So it's really providing that unique opportunity to bring those forward. And I think, as Clint talked about, it's a number of different things. It's I guess working to enhance the already existing curriculum, providing opportunities for Indigenous knowledge holders to come into the classroom to begin a process of sharing, and at the same time, to engage students in the classrooms in I want to call it a more equitable understanding of knowledge. In terms of that, I mean to understand that there's not just one way of seeing the world, that there are a multiplicity of different ways of seeing the world, and each has their own integrity, each has their own authenticity, each has their own, strengths and weaknesses, and at the same time, each has their own way of being able to assess and to understand problems. The role now for our young people, I think, is really critical in understanding that from our generation and beyond, those ones behind us, and I'm talking in terms of modern Canadian society and modern North American or Neo-European society, we have, created much of the degradation that we see all around us. I think the job now, in terms of the species and biodiversity and loss of habitat, contamination of water, air, land, and water, etc., all the rest. But the point of it is that I think that the new economy and how we should be teaching and talking and engaging with students is really to begin to focus them on the necessity of restoration. This opportunity to restore both human, I want to call it human spiritual integrity, or the function of us and relationship of us as an understanding of us as human beings and how we need to live together and learn how to live in place, predicated on ideas and concepts, practices, principles that are embedded within Indigenous reality. And at the same time, then looking at a new set of engagement to create real, true collaboration between knowledge systems from all around the world to address the complexity of problems that we're facing, really arms the students with a new way of seeing the world. So the new economy, to me, is going to be predicated on our ability to restore our integrity as human beings, but and at the same time to restore the ecological integrity of the places that we're choosing to live, to restore the integrity and the function of those places. And so we got a lot of work to be able to do do that, especially within Canada, because we're at a precipice now when we see it's almost as though that what we're being presented with, it's either, environment or economy, and you make the choice. And so I'm not understanding that if we don't have an environment, we don't have an economy. It's really, central in being able to arm students to be able to say it's not that way at all, that these two things need to be tied together, and to challenge students in the way that they see the world, and at the same time to provide them with a particular context that enables real true collaboration and true cooperation between knowledge systems and between people. So that opportunity, I think, to have it in the classroom, demands that people come in that provide ideas and concepts and be able to elevate those students and to enable them to really to fulfill the responsibility that they were given as human beings to work for the continuation of life.
Thanks so much, Ken. I'm looking at Liz now. Do we have time for one more question? Okay, we'll do one more question, and then we'll wrap up. So this question is from Jillian Smith, who says, I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation and a Ph.D. candidate researching how to reclaim industrial impacted lands with Indigenous knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge. I'm finding it difficult to integrate different knowledge systems. How do the logistics of IPCAs work? In other words, how do you physically get knowledge keepers and scientists in the same room talking to each other? Have you encountered resistance anywhere?
And respectfully, I'm chuckling because I've mostly encountered resistance, and you tell a beautiful story that we don't have time for. But my answer to that is creating ethical spaces. I think the governance, and it may be a big word, but it's about how do we structure the conversations? How do we create the space where we feel safe to share our different perspectives? So that requires give and take by all who are involved. And I repeatedly see Western science systems and Western scientists who see their system of knowledge as superior. That's an incredible barrier. It's a showstopper. So you have to work on developing a respectful relationship. If it's not there, it won't work.
Thank you. Dan or Clint, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that, Jillian, that's a good question. I think that that practice is emerging. I think that, coming out of the 90s to address some of the harvesting issues that we've seen within the province and with communities and the recognition of Aboriginal treaty rights, started to create a dialogue. Fell off the rails sometimes, got back on, and over a period of time, communities began to recognize the necessity of taking hold of their own territories and their own work, and being able to not have to count on the province or anyone else to be able to manage so-called resources within the communities. But it started a really deep dialogue, and I think that dialogue is evolving and emerging as we speak. That's kind of what we're doing here today in Victoria, with the IPCAs here, talking with ENGOs and noted ICE members here in BC. So it presents a really unique opportunity, but at the same time, that's an evolving process. It's happening from time to time on a wide variety of different areas, but it's just a slow, I want to call it a romance of knowledge systems and how they are interacting with one another that will continue to emerge. But it's the point of talking about it, recognizing the opportunities and recognizing the authority of those knowledge systems and their ability to come together to address the complexity of issues that we face.
Thank you. But did you want to add anything to that, or?
No.
Okay. Did any of you want to have one last comment before we wrap up?
Just really in short, one of the things that I'm really, I guess, kind of being inspired by is the recognition and the coming to know of sort of knowledge systems and what they bring. When you look at kind of Western environmental knowledge, it talks a lot about content, and it talks a lot about information and data, which provides a really wealth of knowledge. But at the same time, when we talk about Indigenous knowledge systems, it really provides the context to understand that knowledge. And so when you bring those two things together, you have content and context, and you see how that those two things become, I guess, supportive of one another, engaging with one another, it creates an individual that has a broader, richer, deeper understanding of the world around them. And that's really, I think, that the opportunity that's presenting itself here is that as we continue this dialogue and as we continue our conversations and as we continue working together and to develop, unique opportunities and partnerships, I think that it really enables us, all of us, to leave a legacy as of what Clint mentioned earlier, so that generations behind us don't ask us, what were we thinking, but basically being able to say that, you have really been thinking about us when we start talking about the future generations. So I really like that, Clint. So thank you for that.
What I would say, Anne, very quickly, Woods Hole, a think tank in Massachusetts, and I went last. And we're asked to wrap it up in a sentence. And what came to me, and what I prayed for actually, was that sometimes we look at problem solving and solutions as highly complex. But actually, I feel we've been given guidance on how to keep it simple. So what I said was, when the world learns to daily practice gratitude and reciprocity, the veil will be lifted and we will know how to live on this land. And so, the Creator, our elders, all of us, deep down in know that, and it really is that simple.
We're good.
Thank you so much. All right, well, I think we need to bring this to an end. And first of all, I just want to say thanks so much to all three of you. For anybody who knows any of these fellows, they are so incredibly busy and sought after for their guidance and their wisdom and sought after as speakers. So we're really very lucky to be able to have them here today on this webinar. So thanks very, very much to all three of you. And for those who would like to continue the conversation, I'd just like to remind you about the OTF Knowledge Center as a place where that can happen, a public place where that can happen. If you have questions and so on, and you can watch those and direct them to Larry and Clint and Dan and others. And I also wanted to let you know that we are going to have another gathering on protected areas in October in Kingston. And that's going to be from October the 16th to the 18th in Kingston. And the theme this year is going to be protected areas and climate change. So if any of you are interested, you can contact me at Ontario Nature, and I can give you more information about that gathering. Okay, is there anything, Liz, that we need to do to say?
No, I want to express my gratitude and incredible job moderating today, and to Dan and Clint and Larry. Really, really appreciate all that you shared with us today, and I will be taking this with me into my work. Thanks very much.
So thanks everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Good. Onagi wahi.